Ready to hear the most shocking cheating stories from Reddit? Here are the top 4 cases that will change everything you thought you knew.
Story 1. I watched my wife kiss another man through the window of our bedroom.
I always thought my life was boring. I had a decent job, a beautiful wife, and a cat that judged me like a tiny furry Gordon Ramsay. But that Thursday night, boredom took a nosedive into chaos. I came home early because I forgot my lunch at work, which was true, but also a great excuse to surprise my wife. I got to our street, parked the car, and noticed something odd. Our bedroom window was slightly open, which was weird because we always sleep with it locked. Curiosity, that sneaky little traitor, got the better of me. I climbed up the fire escape like some deranged spy in a budget action movie. I peeked through the window, and that's when my brain hit the brakes hard. There she was, my wife, standing dangerously close to a man I didn't recognize. And then, like a scene ripped straight out of a rom-com/horror film, she leaned in and kissed him. Not a peck, not some awkward brush of lips. I'm talking full-on cinematic tongue-in-the-cheek of betrayal. My first instinct was to scream, but my throat decided to go on strike. I froze like a deer in headlights, except the headlights were a betrayal-powered spotlight. The man looked about 6 inches taller than me, which was unfair, and had the smugness of someone who knew he'd won the lottery of my wife's affections.
Time slowed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink properly, because blinking felt like cheating in this live-action nightmare. And then, just when I thought I might silently crawl back to my car and call it a day, they both noticed me. My wife's eyes went wide, and the man froze like he was caught stealing candy from a baby. Then she smiled. Not a oops, caught in the act smile, but a welcome to the show, honey smile. I swear the universe rewrote itself in that second, replacing all my expectations with a cosmic joke where I was the punchline. And before I could think, the man waved. Waved. Like we were all old friends at a barbecue and nothing catastrophic had just happened. I stumbled backward and, of course, did the most graceful thing possible. I tripped over the fire escape rung, catching myself with all the elegance of a newborn giraffe on roller skates. My heart was doing gymnastics I didn't sign up for, and my brain scrambled to formulate a plan that didn't involve immediate homicide. So naturally, I did what any rational adult would do. I stayed put and pretended to be a shadow. Meanwhile, the man leaned close to my wife, whispering something that sounded suspiciously like, "So, is he coming in?" I might have misheard. In hindsight, I probably didn't.
I considered calling the cops, but then I realized cops would never believe me. "Hello, officer, my wife is kissing a man through the bedroom window." Yes, through the window. No, not on the sidewalk, please don't laugh. That wouldn't fly. So in a moment of sheer genius, or madness, I grabbed my phone and started recording. Not because I wanted evidence, but because maybe if this ended badly, the world deserved to witness my dignity evaporate. I crouched there, the cold metal biting my palms, and waited for the perfect opportunity to intervene, or at least to scream incoherently and cause a scene worthy of a viral video. Then it happened. My wife turned, looked straight at me, and said, "You should join us." My jaw hit the rung. I swear it left a dent, and the man winked like I was auditioning contestant on some bizarre reality show. I froze again, but this time my mind went into overdrive. Was she insane? Was this a prank? Or had I just walked into the Twilight Zone where the rules of marriage and decency were rewritten hourly? I decided to stay silent. But the universe, clearly not done mocking me, decided to add another layer of chaos. The cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had been sleeping by the window, leapt up and landed squarely on the man's shoulder. Chaos ensued. Glasses wobbled, the man flailed like he was auditioning for Cirque du Soleil, and my wife screamed, not from fear, but from laughter.
By now, this situation had devolved into what could only be described as a romantic horror comedy meets slapstick circus. I was frozen, half in awe, half in disbelief, and fully convinced I needed therapy. The man tried to maintain composure with Mr. Whiskers clinging to him like a fur-covered grappling hook. My wife, tears of laughter streaming down her face, said, "He likes you already." I don't even know if she meant the cat or me, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the fact that my carefully curated life had just been hijacked by a feline, a stranger, and the woman I thought I knew. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. The man tried to escape, but in his flailing, he tripped over my discarded shoes and crashed straight through the bedroom chair. A loud crash echoed through the apartment like a drum roll for impending doom. My wife gasped, I winced, and Mr. Whiskers leapt onto my shoulder, clearly expecting me to deal with this mess. I couldn't move, couldn't react, couldn't even process breathing properly. I had two options: run like a coward or step inside and confront the madness. And in that moment, I realized that neither option was safer than the other, because the universe clearly had a grudge against me and my sense of marital normalcy. So I did the only thing left. I opened the window and said, "Do you mind if I join?" My voice sounded like a dying robot, but somehow it was the bravest thing I'd ever said. My wife burst into laughter, the man groaned, and Mr. Whiskers gave me the judgmental glare only a cat could manage. Somehow, someway, that night didn't end in police sirens or a lawsuit. It ended with me sitting awkwardly on the edge of our bed, trying not to fall off, while my wife kissed me like nothing had happened, then looked at me with a grin that said, "Oh, it just happened." And I realized my life was officially never boring again.
Story 2, how I accidentally uncovered my husband's secret life that he never told me about.
I never thought I'd become one of those people who stumble upon a spouse's double life, but here I am, living proof. It all started on a Tuesday, the worst day for life-altering revelations. I was doing laundry, which is the unsung gateway to chaos, when I found a stack of envelopes in the back of the dryer. I assumed it was just old bills, but nope. They were invitations, all glossy, all black tie, with my husband's name signed in bold, mysterious script. The kicker, they were from a society I'd never heard of, called the Midnight Menagerie. My first thought was, cool, he joined a quirky birdwatching club. My second thought, after Googling it, was, oh God, I am married to a secret society freak. Curiosity gnawed at me like a squirrel on a power line. I decided to investigate, casually, as one does when one's life is about to implode. The next Friday, he claimed he was going to a business dinner downtown. Naturally, I coincidentally showed up 5 blocks away in my least conspicuous trench coat, which apparently looks like a ninja's rejected audition outfit. I followed him, dodging pedestrians and almost colliding with a street performer dressed as a giant banana, until he slipped into a building that looked like an abandoned opera house. This is where my adventure officially went from mildly concerned spouse to undercover chaos agent. Inside, the place was ridiculous. Picture a mix between a masquerade ball and a James Bond villain's bachelor pad. Everyone wore masks, tuxedos, and capes for reasons I couldn't yet comprehend. My husband greeted them like he was the king of this bizarre realm, and I realized he had perfected the art of the double life. He wasn't just attending events, he was orchestrating them. Before I could process the absurdity, a man in a sequined jester costume pointed directly at me and shouted, "The spy is here!" At that moment, my stomach dropped, my coffee reflexively came up, and I thought, yep, this is the part of life you can't prepare for.
They whisked me into a room that looked like a dungeon-themed tea party, where velvet curtains met chains and chandeliers. A woman with a cat mask, whose voice could either soothe a storm or scare a cat into therapy, interrogated me. I tried to play it cool, but my attempts at humor came out as nervous giggles. I'm just here for the complimentary hors d'oeuvres, I squeaked. She didn't laugh. That's when I realized the stakes were absurdly high, like national spy level high, but also hysterically low because someone next to me was sipping tea through a golden straw shaped like a unicorn. My husband finally noticed me and tried to act casual, waving as if nothing unusual was happening. I think he forgot that in this world, casual waving looks like a death sentence. "You weren't supposed to see this," he hissed, and I swear his voice cracked like a prepubescent karaoke singer. Before I could ask what exactly this was, the floor beneath us shook. Cue dramatic lighting and a fog machine spitting clouds that smelled faintly of popcorn. The jester man screamed something in a language I assumed was either Italian or made-up nonsense, and suddenly everyone sprinted toward hidden trapdoors. My husband grabbed my hand, and we were pulled into a secret passage that smelled like wet dog and old books. We emerged in a massive underground room filled with dogs. Not just dogs, but dogs in costumes, knights, pirates, and even a few tiny superhero capes. And there, in the center, stood a throne, and on it, a Great Dane wearing a monocle. My husband knelt and whispered something to the dog, and I genuinely thought my brain had short-circuited. He turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "I lead an elite canine council." I laughed out loud, then almost cried. Was this real life? My life? Had I married a man who secretly commands a society of dogs in formal attire? I had a lot of questions, but the dogs seemed more important than my sanity.
Before I could react further, alarms blared. Turns out a rival dog society, the Feline Syndicate, had discovered our location. Panic ensued. Dogs barking orders, humans screaming like they were in a low-budget action movie, and my husband grabbed me and shouted, "We stick together or we're toast." I did what any rational person would do. I grabbed a poodle dressed like Napoleon and ran. Somehow we ended up in a broom closet that smelled like desperation and old socks, trying to hold back laughter and tears simultaneously. When the dust settled and we peeked out, the rival group had left. My husband, exhausted but triumphant, turned to me and said, "I wanted to tell you, I swear, but the induction ceremony rules are very strict. No spouses allowed. Ever." I blinked at him, processing that my husband had lived a double life with dogs that apparently influenced world events. He then shrugged, smiled, and added, "Also, there is a secret handshake. Want to learn it?" I laughed until I cried, realizing my mundane life had just been obliterated into chaos, comedy, and canine politics. Now, every time I see my husband chatting on his phone or disappearing on business trips, I remember that night. I'm more vigilant, but also invested. Because honestly, life's better when your spouse leads a secret canine society. Plus, the stories at parties are unbeatable, and I keep the jester's sequined mask hidden in the laundry room, just in case. After all, nothing says married life like dodging secret dog councils and learning how to bow to a Great Dane in a monocle.
Story 3. Divorce after 15 years. Everyone thought we were happy, but the truth was worse than any rumor.
Everyone thought we had it all. 15 years of marriage, a house that looked like a Pinterest board exploded in it, 2 kids who could probably negotiate peace treaties, and a social life that screamed, "We're perfect." I thought we were happy too, until one Tuesday when I found out my wife had been leaving sticky notes for herself around the house, not for fun, but to remind herself that she didn't actually like me. Like, one note said, "Don't cry when he eats the last cookie, he doesn't care." I laughed. I laughed a lot until I realized she wasn't joking. That's when the first tiny crack in our happily ever after started swallowing me whole. I mean, who leaves notes to themselves to survive a marriage? Spoiler, someone who's been silently plotting your doom. I tried to confront her casually, like a normal human. "Hey, why all the notes?" I asked over a bowl of spaghetti that was 90% ketchup. She smiled, that terrifyingly calm smile that could either mean she loves me or I just bought a chainsaw. She said, "Oh, just reminders to keep my sanity." I nodded, pretending that sounded reasonable, while secretly imagining her hosting clandestine meetings with my future ex-husband's club. Oh, wait, that's me. Over the next week, I found more notes. Remember, he doesn't listen. Today, he will say, "I'm fine," 17 times. Be ready. At this point, I started speaking in code to my own self. Don't answer any questions about the toaster. Then came the infamous dinner incident. I innocently cooked a steak, medium rare, perfection, and she dropped the bomb. "We need to talk." My heart raced, and I swear the dog looked at me like, "This is it, buddy." We sat. She sipped her wine with that predatory elegance, and she said the words that felt like a slap and a punch at the same time. "I think I want a divorce." The fork in my hand froze midair. The kids screamed because apparently they had been secretly practicing for this exact moment. I thought, well, at least the steak is still good. But no, she followed it up with, "We've been pretending for years. Everyone thinks we're happy, but it's worse than any rumor you've heard." Worse than gossip about your neighbor's cat wearing a top hat? Worse.
The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, passive-aggressive texts, and me discovering that apparently I had been the reason the bathroom smelled like vinegar for a decade. She had invented a mysterious ventilation therapy system that I was apparently failing at. I went to a lawyer who asked why I hadn't noticed anything sooner. I shrugged, like I assumed it was normal to walk into a room and wonder if you had accidentally entered a pickle factory. He didn't laugh. That's when I realized divorce is a mix of war, theater, and bureaucracy, all while your life soundtrack is played by screaming kids and Eye of the Tiger on repeat in your nightmares. Things got weirder fast. One night, she accused me of emotionally cheating with my own reflection. She said, "You smile at yourself too much in the mirror. That's emotional infidelity." I tried to explain that smiling at your own reflection is normal, healthy even. But apparently, I was now auditioning for a role in a psychological thriller called How to Lose a Husband in 10 Days, but make him question his sanity first. Then came the discovery of the emergency divorce binder she'd been keeping under the bed, filled with spreadsheets, sticky tabs, and diagrams of escape routes. I flipped through it and realized she had meticulously documented 15 years of marital disappointments. My socks, my snoring, the tragic avocado toast incident of 2018. And then, the ultimate twist. She didn't just want a divorce, she wanted me to leave voluntarily, like I was some kind of game piece. She installed an anti-cohabitation schedule, which meant I had to eat dinner in the garage, watch TV in the laundry room, and occasionally sleep on the couch in the neighbor's yard. I became a domestic ghost, moving from room to room like a confused cat in a house of laser pointers. Friends came over and asked why I looked like I had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. I said, "Oh, just home renovations," and they nodded, impressed by my resilience. Meanwhile, she smiled smugly from her position on the throne, the ergonomic chair in the living room she claimed as her zone. One Saturday, I decided enough was enough and plotted my counterattack, Operation Win Back Some Dignity. I bought fluorescent Post-its, glitter pens, and drafted what I called the Great Sticky Note Rebellion. Every room had a message. "You're being ridiculous, Karen." Remember the lasagna incident of 2012? And my personal favorite, "I own the good scissors now." I thought it would make her laugh. Instead, she called it a tactical escalation and raised the stakes by hiring a life coach to help her emotionally manipulate me while listening to motivational jazz. Jazz. That was the sound of my soul slowly disintegrating. The final showdown came unexpectedly. She invited me to a joint reflection brunch, which I interpreted as a normal, civilized conversation. I showed up, armed with my best smile and leftover courage. She started the meeting with, "I admire your persistence, but not enough to forgive it." That's when the cat jumped on the table, knocked over the orange juice, and for a moment it felt like a Hollywood movie where disaster and comedy collide.
I looked at her, juice dripping off my shirt, and laughed uncontrollably. She stared, and I realized maybe laughter was my ultimate survival tool. Maybe the absurdity of 15 years of pretending, notes, and espionage in my own home was exactly what I needed to finally let go. By the end, we signed papers, exchanged polite good lucks, and I walked out carrying nothing but a briefcase and bruised pride. But on the way home, I caught my reflection in a car window and grinned at myself. No emotional infidelity this time, just freedom, chaotic and hilarious. And honestly, everyone thought our marriage was perfect. The truth? It was a circus, a thriller, and a comedy show all at once. And me? I survived it with my sense of humor, a few post-it scars, and a newfound appreciation for orange juice hazards. Because sometimes the worst rumors are just the opening act to the most absurd story of your life.
Story 4. My wife came home with a friend, and I realized it was the end.
I remember the exact moment I realized my life was about to implode. My wife, Sarah, waltzed through the front door with a grin that screamed, "This is gonna be fun," and a guy in tow who looked like he had stepped out of a shampoo commercial. "Honey, this is Mark, my friend from work," she chirped, as if introducing the guy was somehow normal. My brain froze. I wanted to say, "Oh, lovely, a friend. Welcome to our humble circus," but all I could manage was a weak nod that probably looked like a seizure. Mark smiled too widely, like he already knew too much about my life. Sarah, bless her, had no idea that the way he looked at me made it clear nothing would ever be the same again. The night started innocuously enough. We cracked open a bottle of wine, which Mark insisted on pouring in a way that made it seem like he'd done this in 10 countries before. I tried to make conversation, but every word I said was met by a slight chuckle from him, the kind that tells you he's silently judging your soul. Sarah was oblivious, chatting away about her totally normal, completely innocent friend. Meanwhile, Mark leaned back in my recliner, my chair, and I realized that for some reason I was starting to feel like the third wheel in my own living room. By the time he asked about my hobbies, I was 80% certain my hobbies were about to be stolen, patented, and used as a punchline at some exclusive office party. The tension escalated fast when Sarah suggested we play a board game. "It's just for fun," she said. The moment we set it up, Mark's competitive streak revealed itself. He didn't just play, he dominated. He flipped the board like he was auditioning for a movie where the villain casually ruins lives for sport. And then, just as I thought it couldn't get worse, Sarah giggled and whispered, "He's always been this intense." That's when it hit me. The charm, the smiles, the casual dominance, they weren't quirks. They were a declaration. I tried to save face by tossing a sarcastic remark, but Mark just leaned closer and said, "Oh, I love it when people are funny under pressure." My stomach dropped. I'd never been under this kind of pressure. Things took a turn when Sarah announced we should watch a movie. Innocent, right? Wrong. Mark claimed he had the perfect choice and popped in a random action thriller, immediately taking over the remote like he was swiping through someone's soul. Halfway through, I realized he was narrating the movie to Sarah and occasionally to me, correcting plot holes and pointing out mistakes in the acting. I felt like I was trapped in some weird commentary live stream, except it was real life and my life was the joke. Then, just when I thought I could slip away to the bathroom, Mark said, "Don't leave, you might miss something critical." I froze mid-step. Critical? My own home life? The irony would have been hilarious if it wasn't terrifying. The final blow came during dinner, or what I thought was dinner. Mark insisted on making spaghetti, and in his chef mode, he managed to turn our kitchen into a war zone of tomato sauce. I tried to intervene. Bad idea. He smirked, handed me a spoon like a weapon, and said, "You look like you need to learn a few tricks." Sarah laughed, oblivious, as I ended up with sauce in my hair, on the floor, and somehow inside my shirt. At that moment, I realized this man had invaded every aspect of my life, and Sarah seemed utterly enchanted by his chaos. I tried to make a joke about it, something witty, but it came out as, "Well,
this is happening, which only made Mark chuckle louder. The more he laughed, the more I understood he wasn't leaving, ever. The night spiraled when Mark proposed a spontaneous karaoke session. By session, he meant turning my living room into a full-blown nightclub. My couch was now a stage, Sarah was cheering like a fanatic, and I was forced to sing along. And I'm not a singer, not even a little. But Mark? He belted out tunes like he was auditioning for a global tour while casually correcting my rhythm. Every note I hit was met with a critique, every lyric with a smirk. I looked at Sarah, hoping for some solidarity, some signal that this wasn't normal, but she was mid-cheer, completely entranced. That's when it hit me with brutal clarity. My wife had brought home a friend, yes, but the friend had brought a tornado, and I was in the eye of it.
Then came the moment I knew nothing would ever be the same. After karaoke, Mark suggested a nightcap on the balcony. It was quiet for a minute. Too quiet, and I felt a surge of hope. Maybe he would leave soon. Maybe we could reclaim our home. But no, he leaned on the railing, stared into the night, and casually asked me about my career choices, my childhood fears, my most embarrassing moments. And I answered, all of them, like a fool. Meanwhile, Sarah was giggling beside him, clearly enjoying my public humiliation. I realized the friend wasn't just visiting. He was meticulously cataloging every weakness I had. Then, as the clock struck midnight, Mark turned to Sarah and whispered something I couldn't hear. She nodded, still giggling, and leaned over to me with that same smile that had greeted Mark at the door hours earlier. "He really is amazing, isn't he?" she said. I laughed nervously, the kind of laugh that cracks under pressure. Mark caught it. He smirked. That smirk, it was the final straw. I suddenly understood everything. Sarah wasn't just entertained, she was enchanted, and I was obsolete. The evening ended with them making plans for another get-together, casually leaving me in the living room like a forgotten houseplant. I sat there, spaghetti-stained and emotionally bruised, watching them disappear down the street, hand in hand with laughter trailing behind them. That's when the truth hit me. My wife had come home with a friend, but I'd just realized it wasn't about friendship at all. It was the end. And somehow, somewhere, Mark was still smirking, probably narrating the next chapter of my humiliation in his mind. I sank into the couch, muttering under my breath, "Well, this is happening." And yes, it was.